Morning, everyone. Morning. I feel so honored to be here so early in the year. So happy New Year to all of you. I hope everybody had a very nice holiday season. Good. Now, who's ready to go back to work? I don't know what to say. How to answer that. Maybe that's another way the investors are looking, buddy. I don't know. I know I only have, what, 20 minutes this morning, roughly? Okay. I want to talk about some of the changes in the market and what you really need to know about. First of all, there are four reasons why investors have come back to start selling again. It is amazing. Yesterday, I emailed a new order into the office. Long story short, at the office, they were just joking with me, and they said, "Oh, not another one." I mean, it's like they were just messing with it, because I cannot believe how many investors are coming out of the woodwork and selling again. Because if you look back over the last 5 or 6 years, what have investors been doing? Buying. How many of you have lost? You know, your buyers have lost the opportunity because an investor comes in with all cash. Investors have been acquiring, buying. But as of last year, or the very end of 2012, and last year, we've seen a progression, which is amazing, of how many 1031 exchanges, which requires investors to do what? To sell, and then buy. How many that are coming out of the woodwork to sell again? And if you're not working with investors, you're missing it. Because the more I speak with the escrow community, and I'm very, very involved with escrow. In fact, I'm the chair of education for the escrow associates of the San Gabriel Valley. Those escrow officers are really working hard with all the changes that are coming up. I don't know if you even realize what the government is doing. They're getting rid of the HUD. They're going to be changing everything next year. And we're now beginning to get everyone prepared for the changes that are coming up. But anyway, back to us. The bottom line is, escrow has been telling me there's just seeing more and more of these investors. The percentage of investors that are selling again, based on all their files, is growing. Why? What is causing investors to want to sell again? I've got 4 reasons for you. I'd like to talk with about those 4 reasons. Number 1, cash flow. The initial reason that investors have acquired these properties was to what?
Make money.
Make money. And cash flow is a big part of it. And we're going to talk about the dilemma of cash flow. Most investors do not realize that even though their cash flow continues to go up, especially now with rents beginning to go back up again, but what they don't realize is that their percentage of returns are coming down because of inflation and because of the value of their property going up. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Number 2, the investors they've encountered a really major problem, something that they cannot control. And you know what that is? Taxes. Taxes are killing. I'm not talking about investors who are selling. I'm talking about the income that is rendered, that they receive each month from rents. If an investor is in an upper tax bracket, let me give you an example of what they have to pay in taxes on the rent that they collect. Number 1, ordinary income tax. Does anybody know what ordinary income tax is now? On the upper end? 39.5%. 39.5% goes to the IRS. And how do you spell the IRS? Anybody knows? T-H-E-I-R-S. What does that spell? It spells theirs. I don't know. Is that a scary thing or what? But that's the first thing. The second thing is, an investor before last year did not have to pay Medicare tax on the income. There's another name for the Medicare tax, but some people get mad when they say it. Obama. But anyway, the bottom line is that now they have to pay that. And that's another 3.8% on top of the 39.5. The third tax they pay is to the state of California. Franchise tax board wants money. How much do they want?
9
Well, it used to be 9.3%, but remember 2 years ago, in November, a year and a half ago, they had Proposition 30, and the voters passed for it because of the schools and all that?
They raised another one.
Well, guess what that 9.3 went up to?
10.3.
12.3. And if they make $1 million a year or more, they get one more percentage point, which makes it go to 13.3. You know what they call that 1%? It's not the millionaire's tax. They call it the mental health care tax. Do you know why they call it that? Because that's probably what you're going to need after you pay all those taxes. Mental health care. No, but that's really what they call it. And so they're looking at 39.3, 3.8, and let's just say 12.3. Let me give you an example of what that means to an investor. How many, let's pretend all of you are going to close an escrow this week. Is everybody okay with that? Yeah. All right. We're going to all close escrows this week. And your commission, each one of your commission is going to be $20,000.
Yeah.
Everybody happy?
Yeah.
The only problem is you only get to keep 8,000 of it.
Yeah.
Because you have to pay.
Taxes.
And that's exactly what the investor is going through right now.
Right.
Why are they losing money? Because taxes are killing them.
Too much.
Let me show you what that dilemma is. When you originally buy an investment property, one of the benefits of owning investment property is that you get to do what to it?
Depreciate.
Very good. Now the depreciation is based on one of two things. It's either a commercial or it's a residential. Now if I have a 14-unit apartment building, that would be considered a?
Residential.
Residential, very good. Because to your lender it's commercial because they want to charge you more points and fees and stuff like that. But to the government, it's still a residential building. So how long do I get to write off a residential building for as an investor? 27.5 years. How did they come up with that number? I have no clue. But that's how they came up with that number, 27.5. So what happens is, if they get to write it off for 27.5 years, let's say they bought a property for $1 million. And let's say the improvement value, which is $600,000, and the land value is $400,000, which one do they get to appreciate? The land value at $400,000 or the building value at $600,000? Very good. How they get to depreciate the $600,000 for? 27.5 years. Now watch this. That's called a straight line depreciation. Straight line, 27.5 years. But in the meantime, what's happening during those years? The income is going up. The value is going up. But the depreciation is not. And the longer they hold the building, the more taxes are killing them. Sophisticated CPA and financial planners tell us that you should never hold a building more than 12 years. For sure, no longer than 15. Why? Because you're losing money to the government. It's time to sell the property and do a, God bless you, and to go into bigger, better property. So, because you do have to take your tax bases with you from the sale to the purchase, but when you buy up, the difference you can start a new depreciation schedule on, exactly. And if investors aren't selling, they're losing. Yes, their income is going up. But the problem is the gap becomes wider and wider and wider in terms of what they get to write off and in terms of the investment income that is coming back from that property. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that is a major reason why investors, it's the second major reason why investors are exchanging. Not only do they want to get more cash flow, but they want to be able to take more of a write-off. Now let's go back to cash flow real quickly. I think we have some items on for the viewer. Let me just really quickly take a peek as to which one we want to put up. Let's put up this one right. Cash and equity. Great. I want you to take a look at the monitor if you're able to see it. If not, sorry about that. Yes, it's in the handout. Does everyone have that? Oh, wonderful, I didn't realize that. Okay, and so that would be,
Page 2.
it's on page 2, how do I measure my investment properties cash on equity return? See, a lot of investors who have owned their properties for 12 years, 15 years, 20 years, oh, I guess I shouldn't move too much, sorry. What happens is that they have a great return on investment. They bought it 12, 15, 20, 25 years ago for this much, and now it's worth this much. The rents used to be here, but now they're here. So they have a great return on their investment. The only regret that they have is what? Wish they bought more. See, if they wish they bought more 12 or 15 or 20 or 25 years ago. So the return on investment is wonderful, but the question is, what is the return on their equity? See, because you have to factor equity, because the equity belongs to the building. So shouldn't you get something back for the equity? I mean, you can get money out of equity by doing 3 things. Sell the building, pay taxes. Not a good choice. Number 2, refinance the building, right, and pay interest on the income. Now you can do something with the money, but you'll have to pay interest back. That's which is not bad. Or number 3, you can sell the property and expand the equity into something good. Or number 4 really is number 4 is getting income from the equity, right? So the question is, what's the percentage of income to the equity of the building? And you know, most investors do not, they don't even consider that formula, and I don't know why. Because good CPAs do, and they show their clients what their actual return is. So what happens is, let me just briefly go over it. Number 1, you figure out what the income of the building is, and that's in your Schedule E. You do that every year when you file a tax return. Income, gross income. Monthly rent times 12. Number 2, what does it cost you to own the building? In other words, you pay property taxes, maintenance, utilities, insurance. You have to pay a CPA to account this to the government. There's lots of costs, repairs, improvements. Number 3, you subtract your cost from your number 1 income, and that leaves you your number 3, your net. Number 4, you have to assess what the equity is on the property. And how do you do that? Comparable values, fair market value minus what? Debt. Debt against the property. And number 5, you just do a quick division. And that tells you your percentage return on your equity. Now here, the average investor who's owned the property for more than 12 years is earning in a range of how much? Of a rate of return?
1 to 2.
1 to 2. Anybody else? Is that too low? Is that too high? The average investor today, average, some will make more, some will make less. The average is earning somewhere between 0.5% to 3.5%. So it's easier to right there. Now let me ask you, if you have $1 million of equity in a building or $500,000 of equity in a building, is that what you want to get back after all the work and the headaches? Shouldn't you be getting at least 6 or 7 or 8%? Most investors don't really, and why is it that the longer they hold the property, the worse the rate of return becomes? I'll tell you why. This is really important, and a lot of people don't get this. I better stay in front of the camera. Values go up. Rent goes up over time. But the problem is this, now catch this. Rent can never keep up with the rate of inflation on the building. You could never raise the rent fast enough to keep in proportion to inflation of the value of the building, which means the longer you hold the building, the more money you're losing. And then you couple it with the tax issue that we just talked about on depreciation, because it's straight line and the value and the income is going up. You have less to write off. Well, it's the same, but in proportion, you have less and less every year to write off. As the value goes up, you're losing money. And that's why, if you go to some of these sophisticated attorneys and CPAs who specialize in investments, especially in real estate, They'll tell you, don't hold the property longer than 10 or 12 years. Sell it, do a 1031 exchange, and go into bigger, better properties that will give you a better cap rate, a better rate of return on your dollar. Make sense?
Yeah.
And that's why investors are beginning to sell again. There's a couple other reasons in addition to that. Everybody loves to see their values of their properties go up, unless you're buying. When you're buying, you don't like to see that. But when you're selling, it's wonderful. But as you hold the property, your values are going to go up over time, and your equity is going up and up and up. What investors are saying today is that they would rather sell and buy either something far larger or multiple properties because they want to diversify their portfolio more. Many of these investors don't want to put all their equity in one property. They want to diversify it. Why? Because as inflation continues to grow, the values continue to grow, it is more prudent to grow with multiple properties than it is with one. Because now the inflation factor works with you on multiple properties, not just one. Here's another phenomenon that many investors are beginning to figure out again. How many of you think that you should leverage your home as far as you can? That's actually a bad idea. Most investors are beginning to say again, you should not leverage your home, you should pay off your home. You should leverage, though, your investment property. Why? I'm sure not everybody agrees with this, but that's the direction they're going. Why should you leverage your investment property? Because the more equity in your property, the less of a percentage of return. Your home is not your investment. It's your place to live, and if, God forbid, everything falls around you, and can that happen?
Yes.
Have we not just come out of a market like that?
Yeah.
You still have your home. And investors are beginning to do more leveraging again, re-leveraging with their rental or investment properties, whether it's keeping it in California or it's taking it out of the state. One more thing I want to just touch on real quickly. You probably have heard that something has passed in California about exchanging out of the state. Have you heard about that?
No.
Okay, let me clarify that. There's a lot of misunderstanding as to what that means. In fact, we're going to put out a little news blip on it pretty soon, like e-fax. Anyway, this is what the state of California has done. They're saying that if you choose to exchange outside of the state, and by the way, at one point, California did not want you to be able to exchange out of California. 3 different times they took it to the legislature, and 3 times our industry fought with Congress and stopped the state. So the state has come up with something new. And this is what they've said. They said that should you decide to exchange outside of the state of California, you are now required to every year file a notice with California to let them know that you still have your investment. So in other words, if you sell the property, you do a 1031 exchange, and let's say you buy in the state of Montana or Texas or Florida or wherever, the state is requiring an annual return statement to let them know you still have your investment. Why is it that they're asking for that?
So when you sell it, they'll tax you.
Because when you sell it, they have something called the California clawback. You know what the clawback is?
Back to me.
They want their money back if you cash out of that investment. That doesn't mean you can't exchange again into a different property. But the state is saying that if you exchange outside of California, you're going to be required to give them notice. Now guess what? We don't even have a form yet. They like to make laws, and then later on down the line they'll finally come up with a form. But the bottom line is we're waiting for that form, and then we'll hopefully get that out to everybody. But the bottom line is that be careful. Don't let people tell you you cannot exchange out of California. You can. The state is just requiring an annual type of notification to the state should you do that.
Gestapo-like.
Sort of.
No, exactly.
Now, really quickly, since I have, what, 2 minutes left, roughly, or less? 5 minutes? Okay. Just really quickly, I just want to go over something that investors are doing more and more of. There's basically 3 kinds of exchanges, even though there's 6. There's basically 3 kinds of exchanges. The first kind is a concurrent, simultaneous closing between the, it could be the same escrow, it could be different escrows, but it's very difficult to close on a concurrent or simultaneous basis. Possible, but not likely, though we do them still. Most investors are not doing that. They're doing a number 2, and that is called a delayed exchange. Did you know that you did not have a delayed exchange until back in the 80s? You know what happened? There's a man by the name of Mr. Starker who wanted to do a 1031 exchange, but he couldn't close his purchase at the time of his sale. This is kind of the simplified version. And the IRS would not allow him to do a 1031 exchange. So he appealed to them and they said no. So he decided to hire a group of attorneys and went to court and filed suit against the Department of the Treasury of the United States of America and the Internal Revenue Service. Now, you ever heard that old saying, you can't fight City Hall?
Yes.
He didn't go after City Hall. He went after the Department of the Treasury and the IRS. Guess how long he litigated in court? For 20 years.
Wow.
Now, have any of you had to write checks to an attorney? Try doing that every month for 20 years. The court found in favor of Mr. Starker at the end of 20 years. And he won his battle. And that's why today you and I can sell and not close a purchase until 180 days later. But the IRS was very angry about that. And this is what they said. Okay, we'll give you the 180 days, but there's no extension and there's no next business day. And by the way, if your 180th day lands on Christmas Day, they don't care. It's that day or before you have to close your purchase, whatever you're going to go into. That's number 1. Number 2, they were so angry that they came up with another rule, and this is what they said. In the first 45 days, you must name what you're going to buy. A lot of you have been asking me, is there any flexibility on that? There is, but I think it's called jail time. It's also called tax fraud. And I really don't want to move out of my home, and neither do you. So there is no flexibility on those 45 days, and there's no flexibility on the 180 days. It has to close by that date. Okay? And it has to be identified by the date. And under the 3-property rule, I can identify up to 3 properties. There's another type of identification, but we don't have time for that today. We'll come back and do a longer seminar and do that. Thirdly, here's the big deal. More and more investors are now doing reverse exchanges. What is a reverse exchange? Buy first, close your purchase, and then close your sale up to 180 days. It also requires an accommodator. It has to set up a corporation. It's got to take title to the property that they're buying until they close their sale. And then we release the title of the purchase property to the taxpayer after the sale has closed. But they have up to 180 days to do it. It's a great exchange in this environment because, number 1, there's not a lot of property inventory. And sometimes opportunity will knock on the door and you have to move how quickly? Very quickly. And take advantage of it. A reverse exchange is perfect for that. It lets you take advantage of opportunities. Or, can you imagine selling a property because you just bought into everything I just told you today in terms of, depreciation and values and losing returns? So you sell, but you can't find anything in 45 days. Then what do you have at the end of 45 days? You have to pay taxes. And what do you pay in taxes today? 15 to 20% capital gains. If you're on the upper end, it's 20% to the IRS. The health care tax, 3.8. The state tax at 12.3, and then ultimately the recapture of depreciation tax at 25%. And guess what? If you didn't take the allotted amount of depreciation that was available to you because your property was in service, you still have to pay the tax whether you took the deduction or not. Which means your average person is going to be paying anywhere between 35 to almost 50% in taxes off the game. And that's why they're utilizing 1031 exchanges, and that's why the exchange and investment market is growing. So I have a suggestion. I'm going to end with this. I think it's time to get back with your investors and get reacquainted with them and talk with them about what's going on. Some of that we handed out today are really good marketing pieces for you to talk with them, especially the one that says the 7 important questions every investor needs to ask. We can come back and talk about that in more detail at another time, but the bottom line is those are good pieces. If you would like, send me an email. It's on everything that I've sent you today. We've got some of these up here too, those brochures. And send me an email saying, Phil, send me all your marketing pieces. I'll give them away to you for free. They're yours. Just get them out there. Start talking to investors because they're interested in doing what? They're interested in finding out and saying what's out there that I can move into that'll give me a better rate of return on my dollar, my equity dollar. And then lastly, you had a group of title people in there. Get a farm package of investors who've owned duplexes, 2 to 4, 5 and above. And in commercial land, you've got gas stations and car washes and storage facilities, retail centers, office space. I mean, the list goes on and on as to available investment properties are out there. Take advantage. Start talking to these people who've owned those properties for at least 12 years or longer. They're prime candidates to rethink if this property is giving them the rate of return that they should, or that it should. Listen, I hope this was helpful to you. Thank you so much for having me here.